Yeah, I was thinking about, like, we've learned about what I've learned about what capitalism is, right? And I said, to paraphrase my own words, that the capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of stuff and their operation for profit. That you can own stuff. That's pretty much what capitalism says, right? That you can own stuff, or private, like legal entities can own stuff. Legal entities like organization and companies and stuff like that. And the view that, like, when we looked at this, I looked at it like that is the problem people have with capitalism when they say take issue with capitalism. I was thinking that they take issue to private ownership, that legal entities can have ownership, and these legal entities does not have the same type of motivations as people do, and they don't necessarily like have an ethical uh, um, dog in the game, bone in the game. I don't know. They don't work in an ethical manner. But I kind of want to go back on that and say that I don't think I see any issue with this at all as an economic system, right? There are many problems, right? But I'm thinking that many of the problems that I think of is based on this consumerism. Consumerism. Because we talked about consumerism as well, that since these private entities, these legal entities, like we live in a democracy is a thing, right? And ownership is an abstract idea. I mean, it's not a real thing. It's a thing that exists in the mind of a person, right? So the legal entity can only own anything as long as people, like the majority of people, agree, right? If we agree that this company or whatever owns this property or this land, that is only real as long as we agree, right? So the issues that people talk about with capitalism, right? That stuff moves towards the gaps, the wealth gaps, the money gaps, the money that people have and whatnot, and pointing at those as issues. I mean, the legal entities have different types of motivation, but I kind of think that that is fine. We have people controlling those companies who are controlling the legal entities that are like power corrupts, right? And that is an issue that needs to be dealt with. But that, like, if we put the responsibility, right? Whose is the responsibility? Is it the person controlling the legal entity? No, they're just doing their job, right? Of course, there's a bit of corruption there, but corruption happens everywhere with power. Of course, if they decide how much money everybody who works for the company should have, they themselves are going to be paid the most. That, I mean, that I don't get surprised by that. It's just they can only do that, however, if the majority agrees that that is what the legal entity has to answer to the rest of society, just as you and me and every other person has to, right? They can only do, like, someone said that they were like psychopaths, these companies, which is fine, but I'm willing to bet that a majority of the psychopaths that exists in the world are just functional people, like they're not to the detriment of society. I think the majority of them are actually, if you just take all their actions, I'm pretty sure that most of those actions end up being to some sort of benefit for society. Right? Just like most of the actions that companies do are for benefit to society. Most of them, not all, but like a lot of the actions that these legal entities take are beneficial for society in many different frames of reference, right? The issue becomes, rather than with the system of capitalism itself, the issues that arise when these legal entities does like fucking horrible stuff, and they do from time to time. A lot of it, right, goes against my code of ethics, anyways. I think it's more about consumerism. It's about voting with your wallet. Put like if a company, if an entity do a lot of shit that is not acceptable, I mean, there's obfuscation and they're trying to hide their actions. But if we put in like some oversight, some rules that it all has to be like a private entity, a legal entity that is not a person, just like, they spy on and see everything we as persons do. Like everything is in the open, where we go, what we do, what we think. That information is all available, right? If we just say the same about these, that they're not allowed to hide anything, that they need to publish everything that they do. I mean, sure, we come into a discussion about copyright and stuff like that, but that's not what I talk. It's more like waste management, throwing out toxic waste into, this is just an example, throwing that into a lake or whatever. All of that, I mean, needs to be documented. All those type of actions, the actions that the legal entity take, needs to be documented and made available to the government, right? If we go add that assumption to these dudes, then the issue becomes purely consumeristic, right? It's the social and economic order that encourages the acquisition of goods and services in an ever-increasing amount. This becomes the issue, because then we're not voting with our wallet. We're just encouraged to spend and spend and spend and consume and consume and consume. And that kind of system encourages these legal entities to do whatever the fuck to just... If we have a consumeristic society, then those legal entities will mirror that. They will respond to it. If we don't care how they make the price of whatever cheaper, then they will do whatever those legal entities will do whatever they can to make them cheaper. Ethics be damned. The onus is upon the real people, right? More than actually even the decision maker. I think we were talking about that in here. Similar with all this mirror iconography. Is that the word? Iconography? I think so. Like these entities, they are hollow, right? The person making the decisions is hollow. Well, that was earlier in this game. They were talking about that. It was not the mirror thing. But yeah, like they have a job. Even the decision makers have a job. The CEOs have a job, and that job is to work to follow these rules, because that is what the people in a consumeristic society, that is what we democratically ask of company, like a legal entity, what we ask of that company is, we want you to lower the prices. Capitalism itself is just a tool. Some consequences may end up bad, but it's just a tool. It's not good and bad. It's what we do with the tool. What we as society do with this tool that becomes it's what we do. That is what you can make value judgments about. The tool itself is just a tool. This is an attitude and a norm, economic order that encourages acquisition. Part on a series on capitalism. Consumerism is the issue. It's the same. It's political weakness is what it is, right? I've been talking a lot about that. We're very weak politically when we're only voting once every 4 years without taking much thinking and analysis into it. The same is we're weak politically when we're just consuming with the only consideration is cost and want. We don't care about what the company does. Right? Colgate In on Tap says, I partially agree. I agree on it is not good part. Yeah, we have different value judgments. That makes me happy that you say partially. So what mistakes am I doing with my thoughts here? How can I improve my thinking about this? Or are you saying that is capitalism not only a tool? This is decadent, right? This is like the definition of decadence. Because this leads to excess. That's where it goes, right? It leads to excess. And excess is decadence. Too much decadence is no good. No good. No good indeed. All right. So we ended off going up to the mirror. What was the mirror thing again? I really liked it yesterday. All right, since this was an institute, they were documenting history. They had like a huge library and documenting a lot of history. And he had this idea about mirrors that we should look in the mirror, right? That's my interpretation of what happened. That he said that, well, the documenter's perspective on any history that you would write down is equally important. And therefore, we should try to examine their own biases as much as possible when you're documenting history. What is my bias when documenting what happened here? To make it easier for someone in the future to read it. That was the whole thing, like a mirror. The mirror just reflects, right? And he said that we are just reflecting, we are perverting what actually happened with our view. So we need to be like the mirror and look at it as objectively as we will. Colgate In on Tabs says, I think capitalism is more like apocalypse than a tool. Ooh, that's fun. Yeah, I've heard that term thrown around. Late stage capitalism. But right, what is it? Like, I'm only going off this sentence, right? I'm only going from this sentence. That if we go with this definition, I kind of like that definition. What about this is apocalyptic? I mean, it's an economic system, and I mean, I do agree that an economic system is a system of production, resource allocation, distribution of goods and services within a society or given geographic area. I feel like having a system for this is a good idea. That's not apocalyptic. That's getting order, not having, well, anarchy is not really a real thing, but instead of warlords, right? Having a systematic approach. I think that's a pretty good idea of exchanging goods and services and production or resource allocation. A system for doing that seems like a good idea to me. And I mean, if we start out with private as a person, that a person can own means of production, that a person can own stuff. I mean, how that is, yeah, the system is based on how we own stuff. How can we, if we don't own stuff, then how can we create a system? How can we structure it? And well, I mean, we could structure it all from top down, I guess, but that just seems worse. Like if there is no ownership, and someone can just go, well, not personal ownership, right? Personal ownership is fine. Means of production is what we're talking about. We're not talking about my home and what I do in the comfort of my own home here. We're talking about the means of production. So owning a factory or owning a machine, owning a hammer, and the productions of that hammer. I mean, I'm guessing that is what communism is all about then. That the hammer is for anyone to use. That feels a bit. How do you structure that? I'm curious. How do you structure who gets to use the hammer when? If not by ownership, some other kind of system then. Colgate in on tab says private ownership generates inequality between socio-economical classes, and it allows for rich to exploit poor fellas. Does private ownership generate inequality? Hasn't. How old is capitalism? If we put it at the legal entities, would the king be considered a legal entity, or would that be a person? The church would probably be considered a legal entity that could own stuff. It's fucking difficult to try to imagine for me like a world without ownership. Like one can argue that a family is a legal entity. No, interestingly not. But from my point of view, right? My family owns a house. I can say that, even though it says on a piece of paper, maybe it's my father's name, maybe it's my mother's name, maybe it's my grandfather's name. But I still see it as the family owning that house, right? And my grandfather's house, I see that as the ownership of my family. Even though it's his name and he lives in it, I could, right? Because I could just move in if I wanted to. Well, not in Corona. I wouldn't want to, since he's isolated, right? But assuming not that, I could move in whenever I wanted. Colgate on tap said generates inequality. But I mean, equality is an abstract thing as well, right? There is no equality in nature. It's an abstract idea. So maybe it increases, private ownership increases inequality because we divide people into haves and have-nots, I suppose. Inequality, does it generate socioeconomical inequality between the socioeconomical classes, or is it consumerism and the people who, like, as I said, the legal entities answer to the people, right? And they will generate that inequality, all the rifts, like the more money to the rich and less money to the poor. That happens not because of capitalism, though. That happens because of corruption and the laziness of the people, the acceptance of the people of that happening. No? And it allows for rich to exploit the poor. That it does. Well, it allows for exploitation. Wait. Yeah. It allows for the rich to exploit the poor, as long as that is democratically agreed upon that that is the way, right? It only allows this to happen if the people allow it to happen, right? The amount of power these legal entities have, like the amount of exploitation they can have, is dependent on they get money. The rich only become rich because they give the people something that they want, right? Don't you think? Colgate Tab says private ownership allows owners to steal value that employees make. But, I mean, employer go into a contract. Isn't that what happens? That if you work for someone, you go into a contract with that legal entity and say, oh, I will do this for you and you will give me this money. Colgate Tab says people are pretty dumb. They allow lots of stupid stuff. Yes. Yes, exactly. So, isn't the thing then? It's not about capitalism, it's about people being dumb. Well, relatively speaking. They allow lots of stupid stuff that you and me consider stupid. Maybe they don't. I mean, that's a value judgment, right? But I mean, isn't education? Like, if it is in fact dumb, isn't education the answer? Not a restructuring or throwing out of capitalism. It becomes about this. It becomes about attitudes. It's about taking the extra steps to vote with your wallet, not by just how cheap like if you have two things in front of you, one is 10% cheaper than the other, the quality of the thing is equivalent, then today we are encouraged by consumerism to buy the thing that is 10% cheaper if the quality is equivalent, right? No matter what the legal entity, what the company did to lower that price. That is the consumeristic attitude, right? If we switch our attitude, if the people switch their attitude and instead ask the question, why is this 10% cheaper? Do I approve of these actions? Like adding that question into whenever you buy something, just adding that question to all the people. I mean, I wouldn't consider a person that doesn't add that question dumb. I would just say that they have a different attitude, and that attitude they have been conditioned to have by society, right? They have been raised to have that attitude. That is what consumerism is, right? Encouragement. of an attitude. And I would still say that private ownership allows owners to steal value from that the employee makes. That is, the employee has to agree to it, to say. And I would argue that we have an attitude and we have a system that where the employee is at a disadvantage. Yeah, the employee is at a disadvantage because the employee has to. It depends on the private ownership. It depends on the legal entity. Well, legal entity. A legal entity. There we go. It depends on a legal entity to employ them, to give them the money to buy food, right? So it's an unfair contract from the start, which I could give you that could be considered stealing then, since the employee doesn't have anything to say about it. Might not. Let's put it that. Some employees have enough so they can pick and choose. Others may not. And that very good argument for universal basic income, right? Which would be an answer to this and an improvement to this. Like universal basic income, one could couple that with encouragement of not doing consumerism, but instead ask, do you agree with the actions that the legal entity take, both with your own job and with if you're spending money on it? Seems like an improvement. All right. Colgate in on top says, I'd prefer meritocracy over democracy. And have competent people decide stuff instead of having popularity contests. Oh, I thought I've talked about. I have a completely different view of what democracy is. Like the thing that you're talking about is like a representative democracy, like a system of government, and that's not my view of what democracy is. I'm kind of happy with meritocracy as well, but who decides what merits, right? Who decides what merits we should go for? That has to be that is a democratic decision, right? What is a competent person? We have that problem today, right? What is a competent person within consumerism? And, well, in capitalism, with consumerism, those two together, what is a competent person? Well, it's a psychopath. The best leader of a company is a psychopath. And that has no empathy for whatever they do. They just do it, and damned be all the other people that we hurt along the way. But that's a meritocracy, right? It's just the person that we value is the psychopath, which I don't really agree with personally. The popularity contest is a form of government where you have representative democracy. Democracy itself, like this here, I don't agree with this. I don't disagree with this definition at all. Democracy means it comes from the people rule. That I'm happy with. The people rules. But here it says it's a form of government. I don't agree with that at all. In which the people have the authority to choose governing legislators. All right, that's the government, right? And then we have the people who's voting in the stuff as well, which is the representative part of government. But the way I see democracy is that the people rule. I see it more as this is the way, as soon as you have a group of living beings, not only humans, a group of living beings living together in a group, like a society or whatever, we can take a smaller group as well. It is the people that makes the rule. It is an amalgamation of what the people want. Like if you take, I don't care, just take 100 baboons, and they structure their society in a hierarchy. Like we do. Humans, we structure ourselves in hierarchies, right? If the leader starts doing stuff that 90 of these 100 baboons don't like, then what will happen? They will either kill the leader, they will leave and create their own group, or have some other overthrow him somehow. That leader will be replaced because he is not doing what the people want, and that is just, yes, like a law of nature, right? It is what happens always. If a king, that's why I'm talking about the pain threshold, right? If a king makes a lot of rules that pisses enough people off, then the king will get murdered or something. He will be dethroned in some way or other, or he will be made to change the way he rules. I mean, that is the same. Like whoever is on top is and make the decision is responsible to a lot of people. It's like they don't have a lot of freedom in making decisions. They just react to what does the people want, and they walk like a tight line and try to do the best that they can. But it's still the people that they are responsible to, right? So that is, we have completely different views on democracy. So even in a meritocracy, I would call a meritocracy being democratic as well. It's just the people decides what merits to value and what merits not to value. And in a meritocracy, the people that ends up in the top making the decisions are people who have the qualities that the people want to see. And that is always the case. Right? Colgate Innotep said, the problem is that an employee can't use the means of production as they are privately owned. Is that necessarily a problem? Like, it's what I said, right? If we have a hammer and we want everybody to be able to use the hammer, we only have one hammer, but we have 10 people and 10 people who wants to use the hammer at the same time. How do we deal with that situation? I mean, everybody, like in the economic system, as capitalism put it, the thing that happens then is that we have an entity, a legal entity, that has it makes the decision who gets to maybe not use the hammer itself, but they can buy the result of the hammer. So it's like an indirect use of the means of production, right? Like I don't own my own concrete factory, but I can contact someone to do the concrete for me. And there has to be some organizational thing there. There has to be a structure in order, right? I couldn't just go there and start using it. I don't know how it works and anything like that, so I would probably just break it. But I still would want to have access to concrete, if that makes sense. Colgate Innotap says it's similar to rent. You do nothing but get more value just because you own stuff. Oh yeah, I agree with you completely though. Rent is like that. I mean, this is a house is not a means to production, is it? Not from the definition that we found. Let me see. Capitalism. Means of production. This is not a home. Are physical, non-financial inputs used in the production of goods and services. That is not a house. Well, that is, yeah, all right. It becomes a problem because their operations becomes a house. Everything becomes like, it's not a means of production, but it is their operation for profit. Which means that a private company can own a home. Which I would agree with you that definition, I think, yeah, I reacted to this before as well, that this becomes problematic. Because rent is fucking stupid. Like, part of why I find that it's so important with universal basic income is because rent is fucked up, and everybody should, in my opinion, all people should be able to have a home. Just to have a home. That's just like a basic necessity that I feel that society should provide for all people. That's my personal beliefs, right? And that this system here doesn't really allow for that, because it allows for people to abuse the system, but they can only abuse the system as long as the people allow for them to abuse the system, right? Did you feel that I explained my view of democracy sufficiently, Colgate on Tap? So it's not a form of government. It's just how groups of people organize the rule. It is always an amalgamation. It's always, you take what all the people want, you put it all together, and that is the rules within a society, within a group of living beings living together. That is always what you get. And then, for me, how I evaluate democracy, like what is a good democracy or a bad democracy, becomes, the question then becomes, how involved are the people in the ruling? Which I find is the best way to evaluate democracy, right? How involved are people? In Sweden, we vote once every 4 years. And most of the time, you can predict who a person will vote for. Statistically, this is significant. Like, the way it is informed by the person that their parents voted on. So that, like, most of the time you vote exactly like your parents did. Most of the time, sometimes it is informed by the parents that you vote exactly the opposite of what your parents did. And I would argue that it's still informed by the parents. And I would argue that that makes the person not super involved in the rule. And I feel like having this definition, a form of government, how do you evaluate a democracy then? You just look at the system in place. You look at the government, you look at the Trumps, and you look at the parties and how they work and how much corruption they have, and all that is valuable, yes. But I feel it's less valuable. It's not an accurate representation of how well we are doing democracy. Not at all. I think to evaluate how well the people are doing, how well the people are ruling, is how involved they are. That is what I feel. That is why I put this as a way bigger issue than this, because this is just a tool that the people uses, that the society uses. And it has issues, and it has ways of abusement. Of course it does. Like any tool, you can use it in a bad manner and you can use it in a good manner. Like, I fucking hate the way that society has structured around rent. I feel that people who builds houses should get paid for it. But just owning land and just generating money from that, I see problems with it. But I don't see those problems as a part of this economic systems, I don't believe. I mean, sure, like any tool will have its own kinks and weird stuff that happens around it. But then you adapt to the tool. And I find that consumerism is maladaptive. It's super maladaptive. There's so many things that are not value, that cannot. Yeah, there are so many things that, right, that doesn't fit in this definition, right? That still has value. It just, you can't generate profit. You can't get any economic value from. There are so many things that doesn't fit in here. So what do? Do we throw it out, the system? I don't think so. That seems. First of all, we're terrible at democracy at the time, so making a big, huge, sweeping change like that, it won't happen. I mean, small iterative changes to the way we structure society, I can see that happening. But like throwing out capitalism, that's a pipe dream. That's naive. It's ingrained. It's ingrained in our society. We could work for changing it. We can work towards replacing it. But all that work would still be small iterative changes, right? It would be, let's find ways to for the stuff that doesn't generate capital, but still worthwhile. Let's find a way to have people do that. And that again, I come back to it over and over. It's why I like to argue for universal basic income, because it becomes a very good extra thing towards this tool. And it works against this attitude, if that makes sense. Just gotta see, is there important? No. If that makes sense. Well, Untitled says, in our current system, I think I have too much power. I've studied math. I know some math. Politics is very hard. Is it though? I think just politicians are very boring. They talk in a way that's, oh man, it's, yeah, it is hard. Yeah, I'll give you that. It's very hard. And I don't know much about it. But you don't have to know much about it. Like, it's not your job to know a lot about politics. Your job is to have opinions and be involved. Yet my vote weighs as much as someone who have actually studied politics and can make informed decision. I disagree with that assessment completely. I think, as you say, politics is very hard. And I think that voting with your wallet is more, it's a grander political action than voting on a political party today. Your money is worth more than your actual vote in the political decisions, the way we are structured now, because we follow these attitudes way more than these. Like, we don't do this a lot. We throw our vote once every 4 years. Like, I've never had anyone represent me. Like, the popularity contest is just stupid. I agree with you there that the popularity contest is stupid. It has negative consequences on having the people rule. It encourages the people who are in government. It encourages them to not include the people more and just like do fancy rhetorical tricks to gain people's approval, emotional approval, not analytical, it does not encourage people to be involved in the ruling. But I think a bigger political issue today is the wallet, that your voice matters more the more money you have. And I think that has a bigger impact. I'm pretty sure that has a bigger impact on how society moves forward. I could say here. Price per. Here we go. In a capitalist market economy, decision making, that's politics, right? Policies, quite literally. Decision making and investments, that's also politics. They are determined by every owner of wealth. This is democracy, right? Well, no, this is politics, right? You're making decisions, investments, deciding where our production capabilities, where our distribution of goods and services should be focused. Like, there's a lot of decision making happening here. And if we're democratic if we think it from my point of view about democracy, then what happens is you have to vote with your wallet. And that becomes onus on the individual to give power to the companies that they like and don't give it to the companies that they don't like, making those decisions. And I mean, you say that you have a lot of power in the current system. Like, I completely disagree with you. As I said, my vote has never counted for anything in the political elections. None of the people I've voted for to represent me has ever been in a position to actually represent me. None of the people who are supposedly representing me are representing me. So personally, I feel I have way too little power. And personally, I feel that you have way too little power. Because you're not ruling anything. You have more power with your money than you have with your vote. That is the way I view the world. Politics is very hard, and I would disagree when you said you don't know much about it. That's different value judgments, right? And I don't see anything in here, any need for competency. I think the more a person is involved, the more they learn and the more competent they become. Right? It's a positive feedback loop. The more you are pulled into and encouraged to be part of politics, the more competent you will become, right? If that is your personality. Or you can just do like we do nowadays. Have someone else, let it be informed by your parents. And vote as your parents did. It's weight as much as someone who has actually studied politics and can make informed decisions. All right, I didn't finish reading that paragraph. I do that a lot. I read half and I respond to it. But then someone who has actually studied politics and can make informed decisions, they gain power by telling you about it and encouraging you to vote one way or another way. So if you study politics, usually you become more involved. And if you're more involved, you will get more power. Because you will have more power because I'm guessing you will affect what the political parties do. Right? And that is one way to gain more power. So I don't know if your votes are equally valued or your voices are equally valued from a societal standpoint. I don't think so. Your votes are the same, and I mean, that's fine. Like, democracy is an amalgamation of what the people want, right? So every voice needs to be heard. don't you think? Like, who needs what you need better than you? That's nobody, right? Even though you're terrible, and if you are terrible and don't know what you need and what your personal needs are, that is still up to you to decide, right? I can think that I know what you need more than you need, but me making that decision for you, that goes against my code of ethics. Like, what gives me the authority? There is no objective morality, right? Colgate Tabs continues and says, automation will come and robots will replace jobs. Yes. In capitalism, no work means no food. Not necessarily. It's not implied in this that no food means no work. I see your point. In our current system, no income means no food. And that is a problem, right? It's not a necessity. It doesn't say anything here. It doesn't say anything about persons at all. It just says that private entities can own means of production. And I mean, in any organized society, you would have to trade goods and services. And if you trade goods and services, then it means that you need to have something to trade for goods and generate that. My idea, my thinking is that just like everybody, like my political views is that the society should provide homes for everybody. I think that society should provide food for everybody. Like that society benefits from, and that you can have that within a capitalist framework, right? You can have universal basic income within it. There is nothing in here that says that you cannot have universal basic income. Nothing in here says that. So in theory, it doesn't necessarily mean no food. In practice, right now, in a lot, like not in my, I don't have a job, but I have food. So it doesn't necessarily means that I don't have work. But I do have food. So people like food, so they won't go along with it. Yeah, and hopefully I see that as a political opportunity. Like all these displaced job, like I believe that automation, it will be booming more and more and more and more, and making up bullshit job. Like so far, society has been making up a lot of bullshit jobs that doesn't really contribute anything. I think they will not be able to make up as many bullshit jobs to keep up with the displacement from automation. And I think, as you say, they won't go along with it. And what happens when people don't go along with something? They get involved. People won't get it. Like, that is what happens, right? When you're not happy anymore, you get involved. And you say, this is fucking not okay. I'm hoping that this automation crisis will lead to increased democracy. That is a hope I have. But we'll see. Maybe there even won't be a crisis. Maybe it's just going to be fine. Who knows? Not lots of, says Colgate on tap. I'm a bit late here, so I don't quite know what he is responding to here, but not a lot of, but too much. When there are 3 and a lot of zeros million people voting and only a few thousands of them know how this country should be run, experts' voice gets drowned in a random noise. All right. Not lots of there are a lot of people voting and only a few thousand of them know how this country should be ran. That is just it, right? That implies, that statement only a few thousand of them know how this country should be ran. That's a value judgment. And those few thousand people, what gives them authority just because they've studied politics? Is to be like me, studied philosophy? Like, what gives them authority? What gives me more authority? Who has probably studied a little bit more politics than you? Like, what in that gives me more authority than you? That implies an objective morality. And if you want to imply an objective morality, then I have a guillotine waiting for you. Hume's guillotine. I'll put the onus on you to answer. Like, the expert's voice is getting drowned in random noise. I don't think that I don't believe that happens at all, that the experts' voices get drowned. I mean, their votes get drowned. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but my vote gets drowned. But that's, again, in my view, I want to increase democracy, right? That is not about having people vote. That is about moving to be more involved. It's about not about voting. It's about voting with your wallet, taking control over it, like taking your responsibility in contrast towards the companies and telling them that what you're doing right there, that is not okay. And doing the same towards the political parties. It's not about voting. It's about taking responsibility and saying, this political party, what you're doing, I'm not okay with it. Just as with any organization. Just you taking your individual responsibility and telling them somehow that what you're doing is not okay. And maybe even trying to convince others to follow your example, like trying to convince someone else that what you think is worthwhile, if you want to. I mean, that's not a responsibility. But some people do, the experts, right? They do that and try to make their voices heard and try to make people change their mind based off their ideas. And that's all fine. Calling it in on time says, whoops, quite overestimated people. Yeah, I think you used a lot of zeros and suffix million there. That became strange, but that's fine. But since there is no objective morality, since there is no right or wrong or good or bad, therefore there is no, there is, like the experts, there is no should be ran that they know about. There is no one person that can make that decision. So how should, here we come in then to the value judgment, from my value judgment, from my point of view, from my opinion. How should a country be run? How should a society be ran? The best way to do it is to amalgamate what are the people's ideas, what do the people feel, what are the ethical values of the people. Let's amalgamate them and try to include everybody and try to find a compromise that works for as many people as possible. That's my view, right? So what my view is, just anything that increases the involvement of the people is a good idea to me. And having the experts make decisions is not a way to do that. The experts instead should be teachers and their voices should be heard by the masses. I mean, we do have that. I mean, this here is available to the masses. If they want to read it, they can read it and think about it and make up their own decision. I'm sad that they don't. That's the way of life. that is why I feel like another political issue that I feel strongly about is having ethics, morality, philosophy, something like that, where you read about these things, where you read about ethics and philosophy, where you get taught how to analyze these things, not what to think, but how to think. If that makes sense, yeah. How to think, how to be critical of ideas, how to not be fooled by simple rhetorics, all that stuff. I think that is like how to be involved. I think that is almost as, if not more important than learning how to read and write and count and stuff like that. Like if we want to make, what's the reason for education? It's about making the coming generations better, right? Teach them, make them better, make them more competent in things. And I think ethics it's an undervalued thing. It doesn't have any value within capitalism. There is no profit in it. Actually, it goes counter against a lot of this. Like voting with your wallet is usually you taking an economical hit personally, right? Voting with your wallet usually means that you have to lower your own standards. You need to replace your luxury with an ethical value judgment. But that should be encouraged, I think. And one way to do that is to lessen the hit on the person. One way to encourage that is just make sure that all the people have more money. All the people can do more stuff. I copy and it ends. Here we go. Colgate Innotap put this link and said, unfortunately, it is also quite often uninformed who do teaching with. Unfortunately, it also quite often uninformed who do teaching. Curse of the internet, or the globalization of stupidity. This also, like we were touching on it a little bit earlier. There's like some calling everybody stupid is, I don't quite like that. Like I don't like the idea of common sense. Common sense or simple logic are fucking difficult. You need to be taught. It's not something we inherently know that comes with our DNA. It's difficult, just like we don't know how to do maths or read inherently. We need to learn it. Globalization of stupidity, it's like, I would flip that whole, I haven't even read the thing yet, right? Same with common sense. I haven't read the thing yet, but I would argue for talking about people becoming more stupid is not a valuable approach to me. The approach is, how do we increase people's mental faculties, abilities? How do we create common sense? Because common sense is not common. It's fucking difficult and you need to learn it. Alright, so what is this? I know I'll start sounding like Greta Thunberg again. She's actually way sweeter than that. Sorry, Greta. I just had to put a picture showing you in desperation and anger up there. But before you, the reader... But before me... Oh, they're talking to me. The reader hit the back button. No, no, no. I'll press this button when I'm done, not the back button. Let me tell you, I won't be yelling angrily at you, accusing you of being hell-bent on destroying the world. Yeah. No one is that. Well, a very, 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 very tiny group of people are doing that. Most people are not. Like, most people are doing the best they can in the situation that they are, right? Instead, I plan to make fun of you, explaining how you thoughtlessly, downright idiotically, are hell-bent on destroying the world. Yeah, I disagree with the approach of this person. This doesn't help anyone. This doesn't help anyone. Should I continue reading? I don't know if you agree with this person or not, but I don't like this approach personally. It's a mean approach. I like people being friendly and sympathetic to each other. Like, I mean, partly I agree with this. Like I've said many times, never attribute malice to something that could be explained by ignorance. And making fun of someone for being ignorant, not knowing something, what is that about? What is that about? Like, there's so many things that I don't know. Should someone be mean to me because I don't know them? Or should they be helpful and trying to find out where my headspace is and trying to help me learn that kind of, learn those things that I need to learn to not be ignorant anymore? It is not that meanly written, in my opinion, says Colgatinotep. Probably not. Right? It's like they said, they don't want to be angry at you, but they did call me an idiot. That's kind of mean. Called me ignorant, yes. Idiot is mean. And while I'll be making fun of you, you'll learn. And is that how it works? Someone is making fun of me. If someone is making fun of me, will I learn? Will I get pissed off and double down on my own position when someone is calling me an idiot? Hey? Like, does that work? Has people ever made fun of you? And, oh, you're right. How silly of me. Or will you have an emotional reaction? Will you glow red in the face, either by embarrassment or anger? And if you become angry and embarrassed, is this conducive to learning? I remember from my school days when my teachers made me feel embarrassed. I didn't learn anything then. I don't know. You'll learn what is the relationship between flat earth theory, the anti-vaccine movement, the moon landing hoax, the Trump monolith of cretinism, the hoax of deaths from COVID-19, aka coronavirus, and some other deeply thought of and even more deeply and critically examined facts of life. Yeah, this is just pandering to the audience, right? People who enjoy reading this are the people who already agree with the author. Someone who does not agree with this, they will hit this button, right? Like you're excluding a lot of people here. You're pushing people away. That is the way I see this, right? Yeah. And equating all of these, I don't know. All right, let me explain. I was born at a time when computers did not yet exist. Well, I don't mean they literally didn't exist. There was, there was no personal computers, Apple Macintosh. I was about to finish my undergrad math program. Yep, I'm that old. Needless to say, the internet became a reality more than a decade later, and cell phones small enough to be handheld were introduced. Yeah, history, you're old. We get it. that? What are you explaining? All right, so you're old. Could have said that with just saying, I was born in 1945. But they're painting a picture. It's rhetorics. I get it. I don't value age as an ethos, not an authority. The words themselves I can value, but this doesn't convince me. But I see what they're doing. They're trying to build ethos, authority on what they're talking about. And that's fine. I'm interested in the math program. Yeah. That's valuable information. What does this all have to do with your personal idiocy? Again, pushing people away, the people that they are claiming to trying to convince, by which you will inadvertently destroy Greta Thunberg's dream of a friendlier future world. Wait and see, it'll all be clear in spite of your admittedly reduced ability in comprehending what goes on around you and in the universe. Who are you talking to? Has anyone ever admitted to I'm having a reduced ability at comprehending what goes? Well, I have, I suppose. You pointing that out and trying to, like, this is about the author trying to stand over me, right? This author is saying, I am better than you. And that pisses me off. That makes me angry when I read it. So even though I probably will agree with the political statements that this person does, I do not like the tone of this article. Not at all. So back to my childhood. All right, we're going back to your childhood. Standardized, we were getting information in a standardized manner through the TV. All right, like any information become standardized. Like before the TV, there were books that are even more standards. And now we have internet and Wikipedia, which is also standardized. That was actually the most high-tech information disseminating medium, right? The radio, already obsolete when I was a child, which is false. The radio is still not obsolete, so I listen to the radio sometimes. That's your perspective. You don't listen to the radio anymore, which is fine, and some weird media that require neither watching nor listening, but hold on to your seat, reading newspapers and books. Yes, books. Again, trying to be patronizing, pissing me off. Like, I've been to schools, they read books. I mean, we like having fun about it, but actually, when I went to, last time I was in a high school, they study way harder than I did when I went to school. But this, I think this goes up and down, how hard we have the kids at school study. I think the next generation after them is going to have an easier time because they are, like, we have teenagers burning out from school, which is kind of fucked. If there was any loony in town, he could only impress a close circle of other loonies. All right, I think I'm not liking where this argument is going. I think we find a point of disagreement here. If there was any loony in town, he could only impress a close circle of other loonies. So, what is your definition of a loony? We'd have to meet physically with the original loony. Oh, well, the loony could just write a book or send some radio waves. Oh, no computers, no cell phones, no internet. But he could read a book. Lunacy, again, if this author is trying to convince anybody, calling them lunatics. Who is he talking to? Lunacy was restricted to a tiny group of a handful of idiots each. Man, he's pissing me off so much. Do I really have to? All right, let's continue. How long is it? You know what? Fuck this dude. Fuck him. is an asshole. Or she. Harry. It's a Harris. Harry is an asshole. It's like, I don't. He likes stepping on people and calling people idiots. He thinks common sense is common. He thinks that he was born with common sense, or he thinks that he's better than everyone else. There is no objective morality. If you can't meet people on their term, then fuck you, man. Sure, live in your bubble. I probably agree with most of the political views of that writer when saying that. I still feel he was an asshole. I mean, not that meanly written. I agree, you can write stuff way meaner than that. But that is my response. I don't want to read it anymore. I'm not interested in hearing what this Harry has to say. I'm sorry, calling it on tap if you like that story. That article, I can't be bothered. Also, I'm looking for an excuse to go to lunch, right? I don't know if you saw through that, but it's like I was just looking for an excuse to go to lunch, which, yeah, if we're trying to mirror, doing the mirror thing, right? Why did I react the way I did? Partly because he pissed me off. Also because I thought it was funny. And also because I'm going to lunch. But alright, thanks for hanging out today. It was fun as usual. And feel free to find any more like articles in the future that you want me to read. I'll give them a go. I might throw them away like I did this one. But it's always fun. I'm a reactionary person, right? But yeah, cheers. Thanks for today.